The late afternoon sun slanted through the blinds of my apartment, painting stripes of gold across the worn rug. On the stereo, a familiar voice filled the air, rich and resonant like velvet draped over steel. Wise men say only fools rush in. My old friend Alex sipped his coffee, his eyes distant, focused on something beyond the window. He dropped by unexpectedly. A rare visit these days. We'd known each other since high school, shared secrets and dreams, but recently life had pulled us in different directions. He was usually full of boisterous stories, but today there was a quiet intensity about him. "You know," Alex said, softly interrupting the music, "I was just watching an old documentary about Elvis last night." He paused, taking another slow sip. "It really got me thinking, about the kind of pressure he was under." I nodded, adjusting the volume on the stereo. "Yeah, I guess everyone knows he had a tough life, especially towards the end." No, not just tough, it was immense beyond anything. Most people, he was never truly free. A pageant, fromagin. Every move, every word, every note was scrutinized. He leaned forward, his voice dropping as if sharing a profound secret. And it struck me, watching him, really seeing the weight on his shoulders, it's a miracle he survived. I frowned, confused. Survived? But he died in 77. He didn't survive, did he? Alex finally met my gaze, and his eyes held a depth I hadn't seen before. The sheer force of will it must have taken to get up every day and face that tsunami of fame year after year after year. The music played on, Can't Help Falling in Love, a ballad that had touched millions, including my own parents who danced to it at their wedding. I'd always seen Elvis as an icon, a legend, a voice. I'd never really thought about him as a person, a human being grappling with inhuman circumstances. Think about it, Alex continued, his voice gaining a quiet passion. From a poor kid in Tupelo, Mississippi, to the most recognizable face on the planet. All in a few short years. He was barely out of his teens when it hit. Nobody did. He was inventing the rule book as he went, and every mistake, every misstep was amplified 1,000 times. He gestured vaguely at the stereo. We hear the songs. We see the movies. We remember the jumpsuits, but we don't see the sleepless nights, the ends travel, the Maynards pulling him in one directions, the fans. I leaned back, taking it in. Alex was right. My undersoul. He carried the weight of the world, or at least the weight of the world's expectations of Elvis Presley. So, what do you mean by miracle he survived? I asked, genuinely intrigued now. You think he found a way to cope, to keep his sanity despite everything? Alex nodded slowly. Exactly. He had his faults, sure, his struggles like any human, but to endure without the music he did, to still connect with people, to still have moments of genuine joy and peace, that's the miracle. It wasn't about avoiding the fall, it was about getting back up again and again. He picked up his coffee cup again, swirling the cold liquid. I think we romanticize the suffering sometimes, but we don't fully appreciate the sheer resilience. He wasn't just a performer. He was a warrior in a silent, invisible battle every single day, and the fact that he kept going, kept creating, kept loving. In the face of all that, that's the story I want to remember. The room grew quiet again, only the faint strains of Elvis's voice filling the space. But now, when I listened, I heard something new in his voice. Not just the power, not just the charm, but a hidden strength, a depth of emotion that spoke of struggles I hadn't considered. It was as if Alex had given me a new lens through which to view a familiar landscape, and suddenly I wanted to see more. I wanted to understand how a man under such immense pressure could not only survive but also leave behind. Tell me more, Alex, I said, leaning forward. Tell me about the real Elvis, the one who survived. Alex smiled. A soft, almost wistful smile. Gladly, he said. It's a story that needs to be told, not just sung. Began transporting us back in time to a different era, a different world, where a young man from the South was about to step onto a stage and ignite a revolution, unaware of the immense inferno that awaited him. Imagine this, Alex began, his voice painting a vivid picture. It's the mid-1950s. The world is still shaking off the dust of war, trying to find its rhythm again. Music is, well, it's polite. Crooners, big bands, country tunes. And then from out of nowhere comes this kid, raw, electric, full of a hunger you could practically taste. He leaned back, his eyes half closed, as if watching it unfold. Elvis Aaron Presley, born in a two-room house in Tupelo, Mississippi. Poor, yes, but rich in spirit, rich in music. He soaked it all in gospel, from church, country from the radio, blues from the black juke joints. And then Sun Records, I prompted, remembering snippets from documentaries. Exactly. Sam Phillips, the owner, was looking for a white boy who could sing. Pokemon. It wasn't just a song. Etwai, Bay. How do you even understand what's happening when your whole world is turning inside out at warp speed? He described the early tours, relentless, grueling, small clubs turning into auditoriums, then stadiums, fans at first curious, then mesmerized, then completely consumed. Elvis would step onto a stage and the air would practically crackle with energy. He wasn't just singing, he was performing something new, something dangerous and exciting. He was freedom, rebellion, sex appeal, all rolled into one electrifying package. He was touring non-stop, Alex explained, from town to town, sleeping on buses, eating on the run. Every single show he had to give 110%. The energy he put out was incredible, but imagine having to summon that every single night, with thousands of eyes boring into you. He was just a young man trying to make music, and suddenly he was public enemy #1 in some circles. How did he deal with that? I asked, picturing the newsreels of the time, the stern faces of preachers denouncing rock and roll. He had a few things, Alex replied. His music, first and foremost, that was his escape. His truth. When he sang, he was in his element, fully alive. And he had his family, his mother, Gladys, especially. She was the one constant, the one person who saw past Elvis Presley, the phenomenon, and just saw Elvis, my son. He painted a picture of a young Elvis after a frantic show retreating to a quiet corner with his mother. Her hand on his arm, her calm presence reminding him of home, of who he was before the lights and the screams. She didn't understand the music. Maybe not fully, but she understood him. She understood the boy who just wanted to sing. But even that anchor was sometimes too far away. Alex sighed. He was on the road so much. The loneliness started to creep in. Imagine being surrounded by thousands of people, adored by millions, yet feeling utterly a mansion, a symbol of his success, but it also became a sort of gilded cage, a place he could retreat to, but also a place that became a target for fans. For the press, there was no true escape. Not anymore. Every inch of his life was public domain. He described the feeling of being constantly on display, even when he wasn't performing. Every meal, every trip to the store, every moment with friends, always a camera, always a pen and paper. The loss of privacy, the fundamental human right to just be, was gone. He couldn't just walk down the street. He couldn't just have a quiet dinner. He couldn't just breathe. And through it all, Alex emphasized, he kept going, kept touring, kept recording, kept delivering those electrifying performances. He was exhausted, confused, sometimes scared, but he had an incredible work ethic and an innate desire to please. He wanted to make his family proud. He wanted to do what he was born to do. The initial joy of fame must have faded so quickly, I murmured. It did, Alex agreed. Replaced by a relentless demand, the dream became a machine, and he was the heart of it, powering it. But also trapped inside it, he was a force of nature, but also a prisoner of his own success. And this was just the beginning. The whirlwind had only just started to pick up speed. He paused, letting the weight of those early dizzying years settle. Most people would have broken. They would have crumbled under that kind of instant, overwhelming pressure. But Elvis, he found a way to hold on. He found tiny pockets of peace. Brief moments of calm in the eye of the storm. As the whirlwind of early fame intensified, Alex continued, his voice now taking on a more somber tone. Another force entered Elvis's life, a force that would shape his career, his finances, and ultimately, his freedom. For the rest of his days, painted a picture of Parker. A former carnival barker, a master showman, shrewd, relentless, and utterly devoted to making money. He saw Elvis not just as a singer, but as a brand, a product, a gold mine waiting to be exploited. The Colonel was brilliant at promotion, Alex admitted. He got Elvis on national TV, secured him lucrative record deals, movie contracts. He took Elvis from a regional sensation to an international superstar. There's no denying his impact on Elvis's global reach, but the cost was immense. Elvis was barely 21 when the Colonel became his manager, Alex explained, still incredibly young, still trusting, eager to make his family secure. He trusted the Colonel implicitly at first. He thought Parker had his best interests at heart, but the Colonel's best interests were always about the bottom line. He described how Parker carefully orchestrated every aspect of Elvis's career. The music had to be palatable, the movies formulaic. There was little room for artistic exploration or personal growth. Elvis, who yearned to be a serious actor, was churned out in dozens of musical comedies, each one less challenging than the last. Imagine being a creative soul bursting with talent and being told exactly what you can and cannot do, Alex said, his voice laced with frustration. Elvis wanted to push boundaries, to sing blues, to try different movie roles, but the Colonels saw a riskum deviation. He wanted a sure's forte. He was making millions, but he was trapped. The Colonel negotiated contracts that gave him a huge percentage, 50% sometimes, which was unheard of. And he made sure Elvis was always working, non-stop. There was no time to think, no time to function. Just time to perform, to record. Weeks on a movie set, often with 2 movies being filmed back to back. Then straight into a recording studio to churn out a soundtrack album. Then perhaps a brief appearance or a television special. No breaks, no real vacations. The machine never stopped. Elvis started to feel it, Alex said, leaning forward. The exhaustion, the creative stagnation. He'd voice his frustration. His friends, his cousins who were always around him. He'd complain about the scripts, the songs. He knew he was capable of more. He felt he was letting his talent waste away. But he couldn't just fire the Colonel, could he? I asked. Alex shook his head. It wasn't that simple. Parker had him locked into ironclad contracts. And more than that, he'd created an illusion of indispensability. He convinced Elvis that he was the only one who could manage his career. And for a long time, Elvis believed him. He was loyal almost to a fault. During one particularly bland movie shoot, Elvis had tried to inject some life into a scene, improvising a line or a movement. The director, under pressure from the studio, and ultimately Parker, had gently but firmly shut him down. Elvis, though outwardly polite, had retreated into himself. A flicker of disappointment in his eyes. It was soul-crushing for him. Alex emphasized, to have that creative energy, that spark constantly dimmed, constantly told to fit into a mold. He was a natural rebel. a grounding artist being forced into conformity. That kind of internal conflict takes an immense toll on a person. He'd sometimes push back on song choices or script ideas, but the Colonel always found a way to strong-arm him, to remind him of the money, the obligations, the millions of fans depending on him. But incredibly effective. And imagine the weight of that responsibility, Alex added. Not just to himself, but to the dozens of people on his payroll, his band, his staff, his friends, his family. He felt responsible for all of them. He couldn't just walk away and let them all down, so he kept going even when he was miserable, even when he felt like a pawn in someone else's game. He described moments where Elvis would retreat to his trailer on set or to his suite after a recording session and just be silent. The laughter would fade, the playful banter would stop, and he would just sit staring into space, the immense burden of his circumstances weighing him down. It wasn't just physical exhaustion. It was a profound spiritual weariness. Many people look at that period as the golden era of his career with all the hit movies and records, Alex concluded. But for Elvis, it was often a time of deep frustration, of feeling stifled and controlled. He was living the dream on the outside, but inside he was often fighting a quiet battle for his own artistic soul. And the fact that he maintained his professionalism, his kindness, his incredible talent, through all of that, there was another part of the miracle. Just when Elvis's career was at its absolute peak, when the music industry, Hollywood, and the entire world seemed to be revolving around him, Alex continued. The draft notice arrived. He paused, letting the significance of that sink in. December 1957, Private Elvis. For some, it might have seemed like a bizarre twist of fate. But for Elvis, it was a moment of profound change and a whole new set of pressures. Most stars would have tried to get out of it, wouldn't they? I asked, or pulled strings for an easy assignment. Absolutely, Alex confirmed. Many advised him to do just that, to join the special services, entertain the troops, make movies about military life. But Elvis refused. He insisted on being treated like any other soldier. He wanted to do his duty to us. The media frenzy, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. Elvis, with his characteristic politeness, navigated it all, answering questions calmly, even as his famous hair was cut short. It was a deliberate act of humility, a stripping away of the showman to reveal the man beneath. This was a huge gamble for his career, Al explained. 2 years out of the spotlight in the prime of his career could have meant the end of his popularity, but he took that risk. And when he went to Germany, to Friedberg as a regular soldier, the pressures didn't disappear. Alex painted a picture of Elvis in uniform, disciplined, respectful, but still undeniably Elvis. The other soldiers, initially in awe, quickly came to respect him, not for his fame, but for his character. Pulled his weight, shared his food, helped out just like any other private, but the relentless scrutiny remained. Every move he made, every letter he wrote, every friend he made was noted. The army might have given him a temporary escape from the showbiz grind, but it didn't give him anonymity. And then, in the midst of it all, came the most devastating blow. Alex's voice softened. His mother, Gladys, she had always been his rock, his anchor. While he was in basic training, her health declined rapidly. The army granted him emergency leave, and he rushed to her side. He described the gut-wrenching scene. Elvis, the strong, invincible performer, crumbling at his mother's bedside. The man who could command stadiums now utterly helpless in the face of loss. Gladys died in August 1958. That loss shattered him, Alex stated. She was the one person who loved him unconditionally, who truly understood him. He never fully recovered from her death. It left a hole in his heart that nothing could truly fill. He recounted how Elvis, despite his profound grief, returned to duty in Germany. He poured himself into his military service, perhaps as a way to cope with the pain, to keep busy, to distract himself from the emptiness. He wrote letters home full of longing for his family, for the simpler times before fame. But even in Germany, there were glimpses of light, Alex continued, shifting the tone slightly. He found a new sense of normalcy. As much as was possible for him, he made friends among his fellow soldiers, played football, practiced karate, and it was there that he met Priscilla Bowley. He described Priscilla as a young, somewhat shy girl, but someone who offered a different kind of connection than the screaming fans or the demanding Hollywood types. She was an escape, a gentle presence in his chaotic life. For a brief period amidst the structured routine of army life and the quiet grief for his mother, he found a semblance of a normal private relationship. It was a chance for him to just be Elvis the man, not Elvis the star, Alex said. He had responsibilities. Yes, but they were different responsibilities. He wasn't being pulled in a million directions by contracts and demands. He was a soldier, a son grieving his mother, a young man falling in love. It was a brief respite from the relentless pressure of his career. But it came at an immense personal cost. So the army didn't relieve the pressure. It just changed it, I summarized. Exactly, Alex agreed. Proved his patriotism. Yes, he earned respect, but he also carried his grief, and he knew that the moment he stepped off that plane, the whirlwind would start again. Stronger than ever. The colonel had been busy setting up new movie deals, new record contracts, bigger than ever before. He survived that deep personal loss and the public scrutiny surrounding it, and emerged ready, however reluctantly, to face the next chapter of his monumental life. With his army service honorably completed in 1960, Alex began, his voice taking on a familiar note of weariness. Elvis returned to a hero's welcome, but waiting for him wasn't a peaceful return to normalcy, but an immediate plunge back into the deepest end of the entertainment. He painted a picture of the grand plan Colonel Parker had concocted to transform Elvis from a rebellious rock and roll sensation into a clean-cut, family-friendly movie star. The goal was to broaden his appeal, make him even more marketable, and churn out even more products. Elvis had always dreamed of being a serious actor, Alex explained. He admired Marlon Brando, James Dean. He wanted to do dramatic roles, to prove his range. He had shown glimpses of this talent in his early films, like King Creole. He described the factory-like production of Elvis movies. Throughout the 1960s, more than 30 films in a decade. Each one a musical comedy, featuring Elvis as a charming, slightly mischievous character, usually surrounded by pretty girls, breaking into song every few scenes. Plots were thin, the dialogue forgettable, and the songs, well, they were often forgettable too, churned out to fill soundtrack albums. Imagine that, Alex urged. You're one of the most comedic, dynamic performers the world has ever seen. You have a voice that can melt hearts and ignite passions, and you're spending your days pretending to be a Hawaiian surfer or a singing rodeo rider. He recounted stories from Alex's uncle, who described Elvis on set polite, always professional, always on time. But increasingly, the spark wasn't there. He'd go through the motions, hit his marks, sing his songs, but there was an underlying current of boredom, of frustration. He tried to fight it, Alex emphasized. He'd read scripts and suggest changes, propose different roles, but the colonel would always shut him down. Don't mess with success. And because Parker had negotiated these massive multi-picture deals, Elvis was locked in. He couldn't walk away without facing monumental lawsuits and financial ruin, so he just kept making them. I asked, picturing the endless string of almost identical movie posters. He did, Alex confirmed. The grind was relentless, filming for weeks on end, often 6 days a week, then straight into the recording studio to cut the soundtrack albums, often with mediocre near eye. While he was stuck making movie soundtracks, the music world was changing. The Beatles, the counterculture. Elvis, the original rebel, was being left behind, making lighthearted, unchallenging pop songs. He felt it keenly. He knew his music wasn't evolving, but he was powerless to stop the machine. He described Elvis retreating more and more to his hotel suites after filming, or to his Graceland sanctuary. Constant entourage of the Memphis Mafia provided company, but also a sort of isolation. He wasn't connecting with new ideas, new people, new challenges. His world became smaller despite his fame, growing larger. He sought comfort where he could, Alex said, his voice softening. He read books on spirituality, on philosophy. He practiced karate, which became a serious pursuit for him, a way to channel his discipline and energy. He loved gospel music and would spend hours with his friends, away from the cameras at Durain's, just him and his friends singing the music he truly loved. That was the real Elvis, the one who found joy in the simple spiritual things, not the superficial glamour of Hollywood. And what about Priscilla? I asked. Did she offer solace during this time? She did initially. She moved to Graceland in 1963, and they got married in 1967. She was a constant presence, his confidant, but even that relationship was eerie. But he didn't. He kept looking for outlets, kept nurturing the parts of himself that mattered, even as the Hollywood machine tried to grind them down. He survived the spiritual death of an artist, holding on to a flicker of hope for something more. By the mid-1960s, Alex began. A hint of excitement. Elvis was at a crossroads. The movie machine was slowing down, the public was growing tired of the formulaic musicals, and so was he. His records weren't selling like they used to. It felt like his career was drifting, losing its edge. He described Elvis's increasing frustration, his quiet yearning to reclaim his musical identity. He knew he was more than a singing actor in forgettable films. He was a force of nature, a rock and roll pioneer. He wanted to prove it, not just to the world, but to himself. And then came the idea, Alex said, his voice building with anticipation. Television special. The Colonel's idea initially to boost record sales. But for Elvis, it was a chance. A lifeline. He saw it as an opportunity to shed the movie star persona and get back to what he did best. Live performance. Painted a vivid picture of the creative tension leading up to the '68 comeback special. Elvis was deeply involved, more so than he had been in years. He wanted it raw, authentic, full of the power he knew he still possessed. He pushed for a concept that was risky, intimate, sit-down performances with his original band members interspersed with elaborate production numbers. Pressure on him for this special was immense, Alex emphasized. This wasn't just another show. It was his chance to prove he was still relevant, still king. The music landscape had changed dramatically in his absence from live stages. He knew millions would be watching, waiting to see if he still had it. If he failed, his career might be over. He described the rehearsals, the long hours, Elvis pouring every ounce of his energy and passion into the project. He was determined to make it count. He chose songs that showcased his versatility, from raw blues to tender ballads, and of course, his signature, rock and roll. He looked incredible. He sounded incredible, and he commanded that space like no one else could. He was talking to the audience, telling stories, laughing, Alex continued. It was loose. It was real. For the first time in years, the audience saw the man behind a myth. He wasn't acting. He was simply being. He detailed the raw power of the opening sequence, the iconic troubled performance, then the intimate stripped-down jam sessions where he revisited his early hits. Each note was infused with a renewed passion, a rediscovered fire. He was connecting directly with his audience, not through a movie screen, but face-to-face, heart-to-heart. It was a triumph, Alex stated. A resounding success. The ratings were through the roof. Critics raved. And most importantly, Elvis felt it. He felt that connection. Again, that sense of purpose, that validation. A huge one, he had faced his fears, stared down the immense pressure, and emerged victorious. He had reclaimed his crown, and for a fleeting moment he felt a surge of hope, a belief that he could finally steer his career in the direction he wanted. He described how this success led to his triumphant return to live performances. Beginning in 1969, the Colonel, ever the pragmatist, saw the opportunity. But this time, Elvis had a say. He built a new, powerful band, hired gospel singers as backup vocalists, and designed spectacular shows that showcased his immense vocal range and stage presence. This period, the comeback in the early Vegas years, was another testament to his resilience, Alex concluded. After years of being creatively stifled, of feeling like a product, he found the strength, the drive, and the sheer talent to reestablish himself as the greatest live performer on the planet in Probe. The success of the '68 comeback special led directly to Elvis's residency in Las Vegas. Alex explained, his voice now tinged with a complex mix of admiration and regret. In 1969, he opened at the International Hotel, and it was initially another triumph. He was back on stage, doing what he loved, thrilling audiences. Painted a picture of the early Vegas shows. Elvis, resplendent in his jumpsuits, commanding the stage, backed by a powerful orchestra and gospel singers. The energy was electric. He was singing a mix of his old hits, new gospel-infused material, and contemporary pop songs. The crowds were ecstatic. This was what he had been missing. Alex stressed the immediate connection with a live audience, the roar of the crowd, the feeling of giving his all and getting that love back. He truly shone on that stage. But Alex's expression turned somber. But the Colonel, always looking for the next big score, saw a way to maximize profit. One engagement turned into two, then into months of shows, then years, 2 shows a night, sometimes more. For weeks on end, 2 or 3 times a year, it became a relentless grind, singing for an hour or more, dancing, interacting with the audience, night after night. The jumpsuits, while iconic, were heavy and hot. The bright lights, the stale casino air, the late hours, it all began to take a toll. Imagine that schedule, Alex urged. Not just the performing, but the constant pressure to be on, to be Elvis. Every single person in that audience had paid good money, traveled from far away, and they expected to see Elvis Presley. They wanted the king, and he felt he had to deliver every single time. He recounted stories from people who were there, the exhaustion that would settle over Elvis after a show, the adrenaline crash, the difficulty of winding down after such intense performances. Sleep became elusive, the line between day and night blurred. And the food, Alex added. While in Vegas, his diet became erratic, high-fat comfort food. And then there were the medications to stay awake for shows, to fall asleep afterward, to deal with the anxiety side fall. He carefully explained that this wasn't about judgment, but about understanding the environment. He was surrounded by people who loved him, yes, but who were also dependent on his success. And the doctors, well, they were trying to help him maintain a schedule that was unnatural. For any human being, the pressure was so intense it often felt like the only way to keep going was to chemically manage his body and mind. Priscilla and Lisa Marie were often with him in Vegas, but it was a strange, isolated existence. In a hotel suite, the normal routines of family life were impossible. The strain on their marriage grew, leading to their separation and eventual divorce. Imagine losing that anchor, that connection to a more normal life, while still being trapped in the unrelenting spotlight, Alex said, his voice full of empathy. His divorce was another public spectacle, another layer of personal pain laid bare for the world to see and comment on. Yet through it all, Alex emphasized, Elvis continued to perform. Even when he was clearly unwell, Even when his voice wasn't as strong, even when his movements were less fluid, he still connected with his audience. There were nights where he would rise above his physical limitations, driven by sheer will and his innate love for music and his fans. He'd still talk to the audience, still joke, still reach out to shake hands, Alex explained. He still had those moments of pure joy on stage, especially when singing gospel or a ballad that truly moved him. Those were the glimmers, the tiny windows into the soul of the man who was fighting to survive the very fame he had created. He survived that punishing, dehumanizing grind for years, a testament to a spirit that refused to break even as his body began to falter. Despite the relentless pressure of the Vegas grind and the personal struggles, Alex said, his voice softening, Elvis wasn't always caught in the maelstrom. There were moments, pockets of peace where he found solace. Presley the King. He described Graceland not as a symbol of fame, but as his true home, his sanctuary. Even with the constant stream of friends and family, it was a place where he could shed the stage persona, walk around in his pajamas, play music, or just sit in quiet contemplation. Graceland was his castle. Yes, Alex explained, but it was also his refuge. He'd spend hours in his music room, playing piano, singing gospel songs. That was his deepest passion, his spiritual anchor. He loved gospel music above all else. It was where he felt closest to God, closest to his mother, and closest to himself. He painted a picture of impromptu gospel sessions in the living room, Elvis at the piano, his voice soaring with his backup singers, often until the early hours of the morning. In those moments, he wasn't performing, he was worshiping, finding comfort and renewal in the powerful harmonies and heartfelt lyrics. His generosity was legendary, Alex continued, a warmth in his voice. He loved to give cars, jewelry, money, not for show, but because it genuinely made him happy to see others happy. He came from poverty, and he never forgot what it felt like to have nothing. He never had to struggle like he had. He recounted anecdotes of Elvis driving around Memphis late at night, sometimes stopping to help a stranger in need, sometimes just talking to people, listening to their stories. These brief, anonymous interactions were a release, a reminder of the common humanity he rarely got to experience. He was incredibly spiritual, Alex emphasized. He sought answers. He read voraciously books on religion, philosophy, self-help. He was constantly searching for meaning, for understanding in a world that made little sense. He sought wisdom, hoping to find a path through the chaos of his life. He described Elvis spending hours studying spiritual texts, discussing profound questions with his close friends, almost like a private retreat from the glitzy, superficial world of showbiz. He was a deeply sensitive soul, prone to introspection, always trying to make sense of his unique existence. And his friends, the Memphis Mafia, Alex added, while sometimes criticized, they were also his constant companions, his protectors, his family. They provided a buffer between him and the outside world. They laughed with him, shared his dreams, and often just sat with him in silence. He was also a devoted father to Lisa Marie, Alex said softly. She was the light of his life. Those quiet moments with her, playing, reading, simply being a dad, those were incredibly precious to him. She was innocent, untainted by the demands of his fame. He described Elvis, the larger-than-life icon, simply sitting on the floor playing with toys with his daughter, a look of genuine peace on his face. Those were the moments where the weight lifted, even if just for a little while. These moments of solace weren't always easy to find, Alex acknowledged. The world was always at his door, metaphorically and literally. But he actively sought them out, he guarded them. They were his lifelines. But he kept searching for beauty, for truth, for connection. He held on to his humanity, finding light in the darkest corners of his extraordinary life. Those moments of genuine peace and joy were not just escapes. They were proof that the man beneath the legend was still very much alive and fighting. As the 1970s progressed, Alex continued, his voice heavy. The strain on Elvis became increasingly visible. The immense pressure he had lived under to 2 decades, the relentless casuals, the personal losses, the isolation, co increasing reliance. Mom bees, and the golmy nature. The jumpsuits, once vibrant and daring, now seemed to accentuate a body struggling under the weight of illness and medication. His face, once youthfully handsome, showed the profound weariness of a man who had fought too many battles. The public saw the changes, Alex explained. They saw the weight gain, the missed notes, the sometimes erratic behavior on stage. The media, always hungry for a story, began to speculate, to criticize the narrative, started to shift from king of rock and roll to tragic figure. But what they didn't see, Alex emphasized, was the incredible internal battle he was fighting every single day. He was deeply unwell, grappling with various health issues, exacerbated pain, physically and emotionally. Yet he still showed up. He still tried to perform. He described the sheer force of will it took for Elvis to get out of bed, to put on the jumpsuit, to step onto that stage night after night, even when his body was screaming for rest. He was driven by a powerful sense of duty, a desire not to let down his fans, his band, his family, everyone who depended on him. My uncle would talk about it, Alex recalled. He'd say there were nights when Elvis looked like he could barely stand. But the moment the music started, something clicked. A flicker of the old fire would ignite. He'd find a way to reach for those notes, to make that connection. It wasn't always perfect, but the effort, the raw emotion was still there. He spoke of moments backstage where Elvis would be exhausted, struggling for breath, but then he'd hear the roar of the crowd and he'd square his shoulders, take a deep breath, and walk out into the light. It was a testament to his indomitable spirit, his refusal to completely surrender, even when the odds were stacked against him. He tried to get better, Alex insisted. He went into hospitals, tried to detox us. He consulted doctors, though the medical practices of the time, especially concerning medication, were noted to be healthier, to break free from the cycle. But the cycle was so ingrained, the demand so constant, the pain so real, that it was an almost impossible task. He described the profound loneliness that intensified in these years. Despite being surrounded by people, Elvis was often isolated by his frame, by his unique circumstances, and by his struggles. Few could truly understand the weight he carried. He was often misunderstood, even by those closest to him. The miracle in this final chapter is in his enduring fight. Even in decline, he was still Elvis. He still had moments of incredible grace and power on stage. He still loved his fans with a genuine affection that shone through even the fog of his pain. Think about what he faced, Alex urged. The constant judgment, the public speculation about his health, the betrayal of some of his closest friends who published tell-all books, laying bare his private struggles for the world. To feast on yet, he kept going, kept performing, kept trying to find joy in small moments. Despite clearly being unwell, Elvis paused during a song, his eyes sweeping over the cheering crowd. For a moment, a genuine smile touched his lips, a flicker of pure connection. He was there present, still giving himself to the people who loved him. He died on August 16, 1977, Alex said, his voice quiet. Tragic end, yes, but it wasn't a sudden surrender. It was the culmination of years of an impossible fight. He didn't just give up. He fought hard for a long, long time, against overwhelming odds, against forces that would have crushed most people years earlier. But his spirit, his enduring will to perform, his love for his music and his fans, that survived until the very end. He exited the stage fighting, and that, for me, is the true measure of his strength. The last notes of Can't Help Falling in Love faded, leaving a comfortable silence in my apartment. The sun had begun to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room. Alex had finished his story, and the air was thick with the weight of it. The quiet hum of a life lived under an almost unbearable magnifying glass. I looked at him, my old friend, and saw a deeper understanding in his eyes than I'd ever noticed before. He hadn't just recounted facts. He'd shared a profound empathy, a reverence for a man who had been more than just a celebrity. So what does he survive truly mean, then? I asked, grappling with the idea. If he died so young, under such tragic circumstances. Alex finally turned his gaze from the window, his eyes clear and resolute. It means he survived the onslaught, the constant suffocating pain, the creative suffocation, the profound loneliness that comes with being the most famous person on the planet. He survived all of that, for as long as any human being possibly could. He leaned forward, his voice earnest. Think about it. From a humble background, he became a global icon. In a flash, he invented a new form of performance. He ushered in a cultural form. Judged, demanded, and consumed. Most people would have had a breakdown, retreated from the public eye, or lost him despite his struggles. Kept going. He kept singing. He kept connecting. The miracle, Alex continued, was not that he lived forever or that he avoided the pitfalls of his life. The miracle was that he maintained his essence. He held on to his politeness, his kindness, his inquiry. He emphasized the moments of solace he had described. The gospel singing at Graceland, the quiet hours with Lisa Marie, the genuine joy he found in making others happy, his constant search for spiritual meaning. Those weren't just brief escapes. They were proof that the core of the man, the good, humble, sensitive soul, persisted through every single trial. He never lost sight of who he was, deep down even, as Elvis Presley, the king, overshadowed him. And in that music you hear the survivor, you hear the passion, the vulnerability, the joy, the pain. He poured his whole self into those songs, and that's why they still resonate with people all over the world. Decades later, they carry the spirit of a man who fought until his very last breath. He faced immense pressure that would have broken anyone else, and he didn't break for a very, very long time, Alex concluded. Kept getting up, kept singing, kept loving, and that, for me, is the greatest testament to his strength, his resilience, and his enduring spirit. He didn't just survive, he triumphed over unimaginable odds for most of his life. I sat there absorbing his words. The Elvis I thought I knew was just a caricature. Alex had peeled back the layers, revealed the man, the human being, the warrior beneath the legend, and it was truly a heartwarming story. Not of a tragic hero, but of an incredibly resilient one. Thank you, Alex, I said, a newfound appreciation in my voice. You've completely changed how I see him. Alex smiled, a genuine warm smile. That was the idea. He was more than just a legend. He was a man, a good man, who faced something nobody else has, and his survival in the truest sense of the word is a story that deserves to be remembered. As the last light of day faded and the room was plunged into shadow, I hit play on the stereo again. This time, as Elvis's voice filled the air, I didn't just hear the music, I heard the echo of a profound struggle, a quiet heroism, and the enduring spirit of a man who, against all odds, truly survived. And in that survival, he left behind not just songs, but an incredible legacy of strength, vulnerability, and the unwavering power of the human heart.